The steam from a freight locomotive slices through the frozen Norwegian night. It is February 1943. Inside the metal shell of a ferry named Hydro, barrels of a substance more valuable than gold sit stacked in the cargo hold. Heavy water, the lifeblood of Hitler's atomic ambitions. The Nazi Reich needs this shipment to reach Germany. If it does, the war could end with a mushroom cloud rising over London. But on that deck, hidden beneath a tarpaulin, a small device ticks silently. A time pencil. Acid is eating through copper wire thinner than a human hair. When the wire snaps, a spring-loaded striker will hit a detonator, and the ferry will sink to the bottom of Lake Tyn. The Germans guarding the shipment have no idea. Hitler never saw it coming. If you find these stories of shadow warfare fascinating, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your engagement helps bring more untold stories of history to light. This is not a tale of massive tank divisions or fleets of bombers. This is the story of something far more subtle. A secret weapon that Nazi Germany never fully understood until it was far too late. It was not a weapon of mass destruction. It was a weapon of mass disruption, a coordinated campaign of sabotage waged by a clandestine organization that Winston Churchill ordered to set Europe ablaze. The Special Operations Executive, the SOE, and the arsenal of ingenious devices they created would haunt the Third Reich, from the factories of France to the fjords of Norway. Let us begin at the darkest hour of the British Empire. The summer of 1940. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force has been evacuated from Dunkirk in a flotilla of fishing boats and pleasure craft. The Wehrmacht stands victorious along the entire western coastline of Europe, from the Arctic Circle to the Pyrenees. Britain stands alone. There are fewer than 200 anti-tank guns in the entire country. Prime Minister Churchill himself instructs that not a single anti-tank round can be spared for practice. Crews will have to learn how their weapons work in the heat of actual combat. Fire should be held for the last moment at the closest range, the Prime Minister orders. The situation is beyond desperate. Conventional warfare has failed. The German war machine has crushed every army that dared to face it in open battle. If Britain is to survive, if Europe is ever to be liberated, something new must be tried, something unconventional, something ungentlemanly. On the 22nd of July, 1940, Churchill signs the directive that creates the Special Operations Executive. The instructions are simple, almost reckless in their ambition. Set Europe ablaze. The man tasked with building this organization is Hugh Dalton, the Minister of Economic Warfare. But the true architect of its methods is a soldier named Colin Gubbins. Gubbins is no ordinary officer. He has spent years studying irregular warfare. He has pored over accounts of guerrilla fighters from Ireland to the northwest frontier of India. He has studied the tactics of Al Capone and his Chicago gangsters, believing that the way they used their Tommy guns was absolutely brilliant. Gubbins understands something that the regular military establishment refuses to accept. In this new kind of war, the rules of gentlemanly conduct are a luxury the Allies cannot afford. The SOE is different from anything seen before in military history. It is not an intelligence service like MI6, which operates in the shadows, gathering information and staying invisible. The SOE is created to act, to blow things up, to assassinate, to arm and coordinate resistance movements, to make the Nazi occupation of Europe as costly and chaotic as possible. MI6 resents this upstart organization from the very beginning. The traditional spies are going about their work quietly, whispering in the shadows, cultivating sources. And here comes the SOE, blowing things up and shooting things down, attracting German attention and making everyone's job harder. The rivalry between the two organizations will persist throughout the war, but Churchill does not care about institutional rivalries. He needs results. And to get results, the SOE needs tools. weapons that do not yet exist, devices that can be hidden in a coat pocket, carried across borders, planted in factories, attached to ships. Weapons that can turn an ordinary civilian into an agent of destruction. This is where Station 9 enters the story. In the rolling countryside of Hertfordshire, north of London, stands a grand country estate called the Frythe. Before the war, it was a luxury hotel. Now, in 1940, it becomes something else entirely, a secret laboratory, a factory of ingenious death. The real-life Q branch, decades before James Bond films, would make such things famous. Under the command of Lieutenant Colonel John Dolphin and Chief of Scientific Research Professor D.M. Newitt, Station 9 begins its work. The scientists and engineers here are not designing battleships or fighter planes. They are creating the tools of unconventional warfare, tiny devices that can kill silently, explosives that can be shaped like anything, timers that can delay destruction for hours or days. One of the most critical inventions to emerge from this hidden laboratory is the time pencil. Picture a device the size and shape of a fountain pen. Inside is a glass ampule filled with acid. When the agent crushes the ampule, the acid begins to eat through a thin copper wire. The thickness of the wire determines the delay. It might take 10 minutes. It might take 24 hours. When the wire finally breaks, a spring drives a striker into a percussion cap, and the attached explosive detonates. The beauty of the time pencil lies in its simplicity and its silence. There is no ticking clock, no electrical components that might fail or be detected, just chemistry working slowly, invisibly, inexorably. An agent can plant a charge, set the time pencil, and be miles away before the explosion. The device gives saboteurs something they desperately need: time to escape. Another revolutionary invention is plastic explosive. Before Station 9, explosives were rigid, dangerous to handle, difficult to conceal. The scientists at the Frythe develop a malleable compound that can be shaped like putty. It can be molded into any form, hidden inside books, stuffed into hollow chair legs, pressed into the frames of bicycles. An agent can carry enough plastic explosive to destroy a locomotive concealed in what appears to be an ordinary loaf of bread. Then there is the limpet mine. Named after the sea snail that clings stubbornly to rocks, this device is designed to attach to the hulls of ships. It consists of a small charge of explosive held against metal by powerful magnets. The SOE version weighs just a few pounds but can blast a hole large enough to sink an unarmored vessel. Agents can attach them using a 5-foot placing rod, swimming up to a ship in the dead of night, fixing the mine below the waterline, and swimming away. The ingenuity does not stop there. Station 9 produces an astonishing catalog of devices that seem pulled from the pages of spy fiction. Except they are real. And they work. Consider the explosive rat. The concept is diabolically simple. Take a dead rat, hollow out its body, stuff it with plastic explosive, then leave it lying around near a boiler or furnace. Nobody looks twice at a dead rat. The natural inclination is to pick it up and throw it into the fire. The moment the rat hits the flames, the explosive detonates. The boiler explodes. The factory is crippled. The SOE produces incendiary cigarettes, pencil fuses disguised as ordinary writing implements, explosive coal that can be hidden in the fuel bunkers of ships and locomotives. 3.5 tons of fake coal are manufactured during the war, each lump containing enough explosive to destroy an engine when it reaches the firebox. For assassination work, Station 9 creates the well rod. This is a pistol unlike any other. It is fitted with an integral silencer, so effective that the sound of the shot is barely louder than a heavy book being dropped on a table. The silencer uses rubber wipes that muffle the gases escaping from the barrel. The well rod is not designed for sustained firefights. It is meant for one purpose only: silent killing, a single shot to the back of the head. Then the assassin disappears into the night. There is also the sleeve gun, invented by the brilliant engineer Major Hugh Reeves. This is a silenced tube containing a .32 caliber round that an agent can conceal up a sleeve. When needed, a flick of the wrist brings it into the hand. A switch like that of a flashlight fires the weapon. The bullet is away before anyone understands what has happened. The agent slides the tube back up the sleeve and walks calmly away. But weapons alone are nothing without the people to use them. The SOE must find, recruit, and train agents who can operate behind enemy lines, who can blend into occupied populations, who can survive the relentless attention of the Gestapo, who can kill without hesitation when necessary, and disappear without a trace. The training process is brutal. Recruits are brought to remote country houses across Britain. Arisaig House in the Scottish Highlands becomes particularly notorious. Here, agents undergo weeks of physical and psychological conditioning. They learn to use explosives, to fire weapons accurately, to transmit coded messages in Morse, to forge documents, to pick locks, to resist interrogation. And they learn something else: silent killing. The instructors teach what they call the art of unarmed combat, how to kill a man with bare hands. The philosophy is simple. Bare hands are brilliant, the instructors explain, because if you are caught with weapons, you have to explain them away. But if you know how to deliver a proper strike to the throat, a kick to the groin, a blow to the temple, you can eliminate a sentry without making a sound. It is not how hard you hit them, my dear, one agent named Pearl Witherington later recalls being taught. It is where you hit them that counts. One of the most remarkable aspects of the SOE is its willingness to recruit women. At a time when women are excluded from combat roles in every military force in the world, the SOE trains them as field agents. The reasoning is practical. In occupied countries, men of military age are subject to forced labor conscriptions. They attract attention. Women can move more freely. They can carry messages, operate radios, even carry out assassinations. The SOE sends women through the same grueling training as men. They learn the same lethal skills. And then they are dropped by parachute into occupied France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, Yugoslavia. They land alone in the darkness, burying their parachutes, making contact with resistance networks, living under false identities, knowing that if they are captured, torture and death await them. The life expectancy of a wireless operator is 6 weeks. The Germans deploy direction-finding vans that can triangulate on a radio signal within 20 minutes. Every time an agent transmits, they are racing against the clock. 20 minutes to encode the message. Send it. Receive the reply. Pack up the equipment. Disappear. If the Gestapo arrives first, it is over. Of the 470 agents sent into France during the war, 118 failed to return. Now let us turn from the training grounds to the field to see what these weapons and these agents accomplish when they are turned loose against the Nazi war machine. If you are still with us, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates the hidden stories of the Second World War. These tales deserve to be told. One of the most dramatic examples of SOE sabotage takes place not in France, but in the frozen wilderness of Norway. In 1940, German scientists inform Hitler that they can build an atomic bomb. They just need one critical ingredient: heavy water. This substance, deuterium oxide, is essential for moderating nuclear reactions, and there is only one place in the world that produces it in quantity: the Norsk hydro plant at Vemork, perched on a cliff above a deep gorge in the mountains of southern Norway. British intelligence learns about German interest in heavy water through the Norwegian resistance. A scientist named Leif Tronstad, who knows the Vemork plant intimately, begins anonymously corresponding with London. The British realize that if the Germans succeed in building an atomic weapon, the war is lost. London must be reduced to rubble before the Allies can ever hope to land on the European continent. The first attempt to destroy the heavy water facility is called Operation Freshman. In November 1942, the British send 2 gliders full of Royal Engineers across the North Sea. The plan is for the soldiers to land near the plant, assault it, destroy the heavy water equipment, and then escape overland to neutral Sweden. The operation is a catastrophe. The weather over Norway is brutal. Both gliders and one of the tow planes crash. The survivors are captured by the Germans. Under Hitler's infamous commando order, they are executed, every one of them. But the mission is too important to abandon. The British try again. This time, they turn to Norwegian commandos. The SOE has been training Norwegians in Scotland, men who know the mountains, who can ski across the frozen wilderness, who burn with the desire to strike back at the occupiers of their homeland. These men are organized into Norwegian Independent Company 1, known as Company Linge, after its first commander, who was killed in action. In February 1943, Operation Gunnerside launches. 9 Norwegian commandos parachute onto the Hardangervidda Plateau. This is one of the most desolate landscapes in Europe, a frozen highland, where temperatures drop to 40 degrees below zero, where blizzards can blind a man in seconds, where a single wrong step can send you tumbling into a crevasse. The commandos ski for days across this wasteland. They carry their equipment on their backs. They sleep in snow caves. They eat rations so frozen they must be thawed against their bodies before they can be swallowed. Finally, they reach the cliff overlooking Vemork. The plant sits at the bottom of a gorge, accessible only by a suspension bridge, heavily guarded by German troops. But the Norwegians have studied the terrain from photographs and intelligence reports. They know there is another way in. On the night of February 27th, the 9 saboteurs descend the icy cliffside. They cross the frozen river at the bottom of the gorge. They climb the opposite slope. They cut through the perimeter fence. And then they infiltrate the basement of the heavy water production facility. Inside, they find the electrolysis cells that produce heavy water. They place their charges. 19 pounds of plastic explosive shaped against the critical equipment. They set the time pencils. Then they leave the same way they came. Minutes later, the explosions rip through the basement. The production cells are destroyed. More than 1,000 gallons of heavy water are lost. The machinery that creates this precious substance is wrecked, and the saboteurs escape, every single one of them. Some ski 300 kilometers to Sweden. Others melt back into the Norwegian countryside, joining the resistance or lying low until the heat dies down. The Germans never catch them. This is perhaps the most successful sabotage operation in history. A handful of men, armed with SOE training and SOE explosives, have dealt a crippling blow to the Nazi atomic program. But the story does not end there. The Germans rebuild. They increase security. They resume production. Allied bombers attack Vemork in November 1943, but the precision bombing of the era is not precise enough. The plant survives. The Germans make a decision. They will transfer their remaining heavy water to Germany, where it can be used more safely. The shipment will travel by train to a ferry that will cross Lake Tyn, then continue by rail to the coast. Norwegian spies discover the plan. They transmit the time and route to London. The SOE sends orders back. The ferry must be sunk. This is where Knut Haukelid enters the story. He is one of the original Gunnerside commandos who remained in Norway. He receives the order to destroy the ferry. It is a terrible assignment. The ferry carries Norwegian civilians. Innocent people will die. But the alternative is unthinkable. If this heavy water reaches Germany, Hitler may get his bomb. Haukelid and his team sneak aboard the ferry the night before it sails. They hide in the cargo hold. They plant time pencils connected to charges in the bow. They calculate the timing, so the explosion will occur when the ferry is over the deepest part of the lake, ensuring the cargo sinks where it can never be recovered. On February 20th, 1944, the ferry Hydro departs with its deadly cargo. 45 minutes into the crossing, the charges detonate. The ferry sinks in minutes. 14 Norwegian civilians die, along with 4 German soldiers. The barrels of heavy water plunge to the bottom of Lake Tinn, where they remain to this day. The German atomic program never recovers. The combination of sabotage and bombing has cost Hitler too much time, too much material, too many resources. By the time the Allies land at Normandy, the Nazi bomb is still years from completion. The war ends before a single German nuclear weapon is built. This is what 9 men with skis, plastic explosive, and time pencils accomplished. They may have saved London. They may have saved the world. But Norway is only one theater in the Shadow War. Across occupied Europe, SOE agents and the resistance fighters they train are waging a relentless campaign against the Nazi war machine. In France, networks of saboteurs target the rail system. They know that the German military depends on trains to move troops and supplies. Every locomotive destroyed, every bridge dropped, every rail cut slows the enemy response. The sabotage follows patterns developed at Station 9. Agents sneak into marshalling yards at night. They attach limpet mines to locomotive boilers. They plant charges beneath railway bridges, using time pencils to delay the explosion until they're safely away. They cut signal wires. They switch track connections to send trains onto sidings where they crash into each other. One of the most effective techniques involves hiding explosive charges inside the coupling mechanisms of freight cars. When the car reaches a certain speed, the charge detonates, derailing the entire train. Hundreds of tons of supplies meant for German forces spill across the French countryside. The Germans respond with savage reprisals. They execute hostages. They burn villages. But the sabotage continues. Each reprisal turns more French men and women against the occupiers. The resistance grows. As D-Day approaches in 1944, the SOE coordinates with resistance networks to maximize chaos behind German lines. On the night of June 5th, the night before the landings, thousands of sabotage operations occur simultaneously across France. Railways are cut in over 500 places, telephone lines are severed, power stations are destroyed. German commanders wake to find they cannot move troops by rail, cannot communicate with their headquarters, cannot coordinate their response. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of German forces in France, had ordered the 2nd SS Panzer Division to move from Toulouse to Normandy. The distance is about 450 miles. Under normal conditions, the tanks could have made the journey in 3 days. Instead, constant sabotage of railways and bridges forces the division to travel by road. Resistance fighters ambush their columns. SOE agents call in airstrikes on their positions. It takes the division 17 days to reach the front. By then, the Allied beachhead is secure. This is the true measure of the SOE's success, not in the number of Germans killed directly by sabotage, though that number is not insignificant. The real achievement lies in the diversion of resources, the disruption of logistics, the constant pressure that forces the enemy to guard everything, everywhere, all the time. Every German soldier assigned to protect a rail yard is a soldier not fighting at the front. Every locomotive blown up must be replaced from dwindling German industrial capacity. Every bridge dropped must be rebuilt by German engineers who could otherwise be constructing fortifications. The SOE turns occupied Europe into a hostile environment, a place where no train runs on schedule, where no factory operates without fear of sabotage, where no German officer can sleep soundly, knowing that resistance fighters might be outside his door. Sun Tzu wrote over 2,000 years ago that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The general who is skilled in defense hides in the most secret recesses of the earth, while he who is skilled in attack flashes forth from the topmost heights of heaven. The SOE embodied this principle. Their agents hid in plain sight among the civilian populations of occupied nations, and when they struck, they struck without warning from directions the enemy never anticipated. The Germans developed extensive counter-sabotage measures. They increased security at factories and railway facilities. They created specialized police units to hunt resistance fighters. They deployed direction-finding equipment to track illegal radio transmissions. They turned captured agents and used them to penetrate resistance networks. In the Netherlands, German counterintelligence achieved one of their greatest successes. Through a captured SOE radio operator, they established contact with London while pretending to be the Dutch resistance. For nearly 2 years, in what became known as the England Game, the Germans received SOE supply drops and captured dozens of agents as soon as they landed. Yet, even this catastrophe did not break the SOE. The organization learned. It adapted. It developed new security procedures, new methods of verifying that agents were not operating under German control. The shadow war continued. By the end of the conflict, the SOE had grown into a major organization with over 13,000 men and women in its ranks. Its networks extended across occupied Europe and into East Asia through a branch known as Force 136. It had armed and trained resistance fighters from France to Yugoslavia to Malaya. It had supported operations that ranged from assassinations of high-ranking Nazis to the destruction of entire industrial facilities. The cost was terrible. Of the women agents sent into occupied Europe, 13 were captured. 12 of them died in the concentration camp system, either executed or worked to death. Names like Noor Inayat Khan, Violette Sabo, and Odette Sansom have become symbols of extraordinary courage. These women knew the odds. They parachuted into enemy territory anyway. They operated wireless sets, knowing the Gestapo was hunting them. When they were caught, they endured torture without breaking. They went to their deaths with a dignity that shamed their executioners. After the war, Vera Atkins, the intelligence officer who had sent many of these women on their missions, made it her personal mission to discover what had happened to every missing agent. She had a list of 118 names. She found 117. The SOE was formally disbanded in January 1946. Churchill was no longer prime minister. The organization's work was deemed too secret, too politically sensitive to continue in peacetime. Many of its records were destroyed. Its veterans were bound by the Official Secrets Act, unable to speak of what they had done. For decades, the true story of the SOE remained hidden. It was not until the 1960s and 70s that the veil began to lift, that the public learned of the explosive rats and the time pencils, of the women who killed with their bare hands, of the commandos who skied across frozen Norway to save the world from atomic fire. What does this history teach us? It teaches us that warfare is not only about armies clashing on battlefields, it is about will, about ingenuity, about the courage of individuals who refuse to accept defeat even when all conventional hope is lost. In the summer of 1940, Britain had no way to strike back at Nazi Germany through conventional means. The Army had lost most of its equipment at Dunkirk. The Air Force was barely holding off the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. The Navy was stretched thin protecting convoys from U-boats. Victory seemed impossible. But Churchill refused to accept impossibility. He created an organization dedicated to the proposition that unconventional methods could achieve what conventional methods could not, that a handful of trained agents, armed with ingenious devices, could inflict damage out of all proportion to their numbers. The SOE did not win the war by itself. That victory required the industrial might of the United States, the sacrifice of the Soviet Union, the resilience of the British Empire, and the courage of millions of ordinary soldiers, sailors, and airmen. But the SOE contributed something essential. It kept hope alive. It showed the occupied peoples of Europe that resistance was possible. It imposed costs on the Nazi war machine that Hitler never anticipated and never fully understood. The sabotage weapons that emerged from Station 9, The time pencils, the limpet mines, the plastic explosives, the silent pistols, these became the foundation of special operations equipment that persists to this day. The techniques developed by the SOE for training agents, coordinating with resistance movements, and conducting covert operations informed the creation of organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency and the Special Air Service. In a very real sense, the modern special forces of Western nations are the heirs of those SOE agents who dropped into occupied Europe with a radio, a cyanide pill, and a few pounds of plastic explosive. The next time you watch a spy film, with its gadgets and its daring operations behind enemy lines, remember that the reality was grittier, more dangerous, and more heroic than any fiction. Remember the women who transmitted coded messages while the Gestapo closed in. Remember the Norwegian commandos who skied through blizzards to destroy a plant that could have given Hitler the atomic bomb. Remember the scientists at Station 9 who turned dead rats into weapons and copper wire into timers. They fought in the shadows. They died in the shadows. But their victory blazes in the light of history. Hitler never saw it coming. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the hidden stories of the Second World War. Leave a comment sharing what SOE operation you find most remarkable. And until next time, remember that history is not only written by the victors, but also by those brave enough to fight from the shadows.